Welcome to the third part of High Performance Imports V1 commentary. This is a fairly short section. It was only about 5 minutes, covering basically car make T&E and then Ricoh Racing. I've decided I'll do this a little bit differently to the last two. I'm just going to let it play and pause to tell you a bit of background on things.
Car make T&E are famous for their Vertex body kits, such as the one on this Sora.
Yeah, most people probably wouldn't even know car make T&E, but if you're ever into drifting, you would have heard of Vertex body kits. They had this one style that they used on basically every kind of car. I particularly liked this one. At the time, I wanted to buy a Sora, but never got around to it. If you're in America, these were called Lexus SC400. Obviously in America, it only came as a V8. I think only as an automatic. Whereas in Japan, you could buy it as a manual with a 1JZ twin turbo 6-cylinder, which was a really great motor. One of my favorite motors ever, actually. They're incredibly strong, very hard to break them, and they've got a really fat torque curve. They've just got torque everywhere. For a 2.5 litre, they're incredible.
The car is a late model 2.5 GTT using the twin-turbo 2.5 litre 1JZ 6-cylinder and a rare 5-speed manual transmission.
To be fair, actually, it's not a particularly late model because the very last ones of these had a VVTi single-turbo version of that motor.
The smooth body kit makes it look even lower than it is, while the guards have been flared by hand to clear the big rubber.
Does look pretty cool even now.
Inside, a 7-inch TV is moulded into the dash, with Recaro seats trimmed in cream leather and red velour, just the thing for an aspiring Yakuza.
This is one big problem with them. Probably something like 80 or 90% of them have got this tan interior, which evidently doesn't go with any other colour of seat. There were a few that came in grey, and an even smaller number came in black. I think only the later models you could actually get with a mostly black interior. But now these cars have just about disappeared. They had all kinds of problems with the door cards cracking because the doors are enormous and very heavy. And just generally, because they were cheap, people didn't look after them, so there's not many left. It's like a nice tight diff there.
The 180SX is more of a drift machine, but uses a similar style of kit finished in white with blue pearl. The engine is a typical drift spec SR20 with a large front mount intercooler and bolt-on turbo upgrade with a stainless steel exhaust manifold.
Yeah, that motor setup is extremely common on S13 drift cars in Japan. Basically, it's a red top, what we call a red top, the earlier SR20 turbo motor, and yeah, that simple stainless manifold. Don't know who made it originally, but there are billions of copies of those things. You can also see it's running a Z32 airflow meter from a 300ZX, and can't see what the turbo is, but it'll be most likely a GT28 base thing.
The guards have been lipped and slightly flared at the front, while the rears have been stepped out to clear the 18-inch rims.
I think later Vertex brought out proper wide body front and rear guards, but at this point they're still doing it custom made. I really like the interior of this thing.
Inside, Brillier brick seats and a roll cage are pure drift spec, with Amori gauges crowding the instrument panel.
Yeah, who needs a Speedo? Yeah. I remember when I originally uploaded this video, people complained about us calling them brie seats. Um, the main reason we did that is because bride is not the correct pronunciation. In Japan, they pronounce it briddo. So that was sort of the somewhere in between that we used as a compromise.
In the Ricoh Racing garage, you might...
The music in the background sounded like Totoro, if I'm not mistaken.
find anything from a Corvette to a Starlet. Ricoh Racing is famous in Japan for building some of the fastest GTRs ever seen. Their R32 GTR still holds third place in the 0 to 300 km/h racing with a time of 18.58 seconds. This R33 GTR may be the next contender for the title.
I was supposed to catch up with Ricoh Racing after I did this video at Central Circuit. There was a drag racing meet on, and they reckon they were there, but for some reason I never caught up with them. But it would have been great to see this thing run.
This 180SX is currently one of the top 3 drift cars in Japan.
Okay, any 180SX fans out there would be pretty excited by this car. It's famous even now. The driver back then was Itai. I didn't know all the details at the time because there was no one there I could ask about the specs of the car, but I've got them here. SR20, slightly over capacity, was 2050cc, probably just a larger bore. The RX6 Turbo ran 1.6 bar of boost, which is a fair bit, made 520 horsepower at 7,800 RPM. It's got a thrust intercooler that's meant for an R33 GTR. The ECU apparently is a custom tuned by Ricoh. ORC twin plate, Nismo LSD, K-Office suspension, which was super popular in drifting back then. It had 17-inch front and 18-inch rear T37s. I wouldn't be very surprised to see someone set up a car the same way now. Everything except the turbo, because they're not very common anymore.
From the setup, it is easy to see that it is meant for really high-speed drift. Take the wheels for example. To fit these wide 18-inch rims, the inner guards had to be raised by 20mm at the front. The guards are also flared front and rear. The engine uses an IHI RX6 turbo and makes over 450 horsepower. This allows the driver to keep the back wheels spinning even when drifting at over 140 km/h. Inside we find brie brick seats again, while in the rear a roll cage and cross brace help with the chassis rigidity. The camber settings are also pure drift spec. This super clean R34 belongs to one of Ricoh's customers. The skirt kit and the TE37 Volk rims are a perfect match for the GTR's flared guards. Built for street use only, Ricoh added an ARC race intercooler and HKS TO4R turbo system. Despite standard internals, the engine makes 590 horsepower, just what you need in a daily driven car.
This was genuinely a daily driven car. In fact, the thing was just about brand new. The guy who brought it to Ricoh Racing and had them do this straight away when he bought it. When I was talking to Ricoh Racing, they said this was what they called the cheap tuning setup because the engine internals were stock and they considered a single turbo like this to be the cheap way of doing things instead of doing a twin turbo low mount or high mount setup. It was generally agreed in those days that 600 horsepower was about the limit for a completely stock RB26. But even so, for a street car, 590 horsepower is plenty. How fresh and brand new everything is. You do not see that much anymore.
Like most workshops we visited, Ricoh also had a neat JZX100 Chaser out the front. We still can't figure out why Toyota sell the Avalon in Australia instead of this car.
Yeah, I remember at the time being baffled at the cars we were getting sold in Australia. I think they said at the time the reason they didn't want the Mark II or the Chaser, any of the JZX 90 or 100 series, is that the back seat wasn't wide enough, which is just dumb. And instead, they gave us a front wheel drive car that was ugly as hell and had no appeal at all. But anyway, it was fun for people who could then import these later, like I did. I think I imported about 4 of them over the years. Really good car. Anyway, that's it for part 3. See you in the next one.